Here we are at Fat Cat Motor Park for the 2017 Minibike World Championship. As you can see, the sun is out. We got riders from 13 different nations here this weekend. Hold on to your hats because the racing is going to be fast, it's going to be furious, it's going to be an awesome few days of dirt bike riding. Let's do it.
The top performers from the Minibike British Championship are joined on home turf by a series of international riders with stars from the USA, Portugal, Spain, Sweden and the Netherlands. Frank van Homert has proven himself virtually unbeatable on British ground in recent seasons and aims to make up for an inconsistent campaign with victory in this one-off world final.
For this event, people from Sweden and France and Portugal came over, which is good. Now we can compete on a good track over a full weekend, 5 motos. So yeah, the key is to stay consistent and see what we can do. Want to try and win that title against all the fastest riders in the pit bike world.
Both Van Homert and his main British Championship rival Bradley Pocock have been race winners in Doncaster, a regular venue on the Minibike Champs calendar. But Pocock is taking nothing for granted with an influx of international stars set to join him at the top of the field.
Bit spooky as you think it, because you haven't seen any of these boys race that much before. I've raced a couple of them before, but not all of them at once. So, to be honest, I'm looking at everyone being a competitor. I mean, where they're from, and it doesn't really matter. There's still a guy in front of you that you've got to beat, and that's all I'm going to try and do this weekend. I mean, yeah, it'd be amazing to come up on top. I've come here to win. Alongside Pocock with CW Bikes, Rusty Griffiths makes his Minibike Champs comeback. But with only practice and qualifying to get himself ready for racing, the Bristolian may struggle to recapture his former glory.
There's a lot of fast riders all around the world. The best are here, I think. I think there's 10 riders easy could be world champion today. I think if we go for the win, we go for the win, but just have some fun.
International favourites include America's Justin Sipes, who has ridden minibikes alongside a successful pro motocross career for recreation, and now steps up to the Minibike World Championship with the aim of bringing the stars and stripes onto the podium.
I raced my whole life, did pro supercross, motocross, and we always had pit bikes in the pits, just riding around, and there were some local pit bike races and stuff. I did that for a few years, and it kind of died out in the U.S., and then Mike at TB Parts, he introduced me to like racing some big races like Mini Moto. He's like, hey, you want to do it? And I was like, absolutely, I'm there.
Finishing qualifying on top was Mike Vallard. Already a multi-time national champion, there's no doubt that the Frenchman aims to add yet another title to his roll of honour. As a Bucci-Moto rider, I've come to England to tackle the most important race in Europe, representing the brand, and hopefully I'll be able to show my best form. The stage is set as the best in the world descend on Doncaster, and over 30 qualified riders line up across the gate for the inaugural Minibike World Championship. Lining up for the first of 5 scoring races that comprise the 2017 Minibike World Championship, with the points totals determining the inaugural title holder. Favourites here will include Minibike British Championship regulars Frank van Homert, who won here on both days in the season opener, and Bradley Pocock, the current leader of the British Championship. Joining them in the top 4 in qualifying were Mike Vallard, who topped the timesheets, and Justin Sipes, who finished 3rd. Those are the riders to watch then, as the gate drops on the 2017 Minibike World Championship. Strong getaway from the centre from Mike Vallard. He takes the whole shot. Frank van Homert through into 2nd position, cuts across the front of Troy Beck. That enables Rusty Griffiths to come through for 3rd position. They're side by side for 3rd and 4th, but it's now Griffiths who pulls clear of Beck in 4th place. 5th is with Blaine Blackwell, and meanwhile Bradley Pocock has got off to a very slow start. He's had to work his way through the field from 9th position, having got trapped in a pack of traffic. He's now through into 6th place. Blackwell cutting to the inside line, tries to find a way past Beck, can't quite get there. That could make him vulnerable now to Bradley Pocock, who's been building up his momentum well in the early stages. Looking over his shoulder out in front, it's Mike Vallard, the Frenchman, looking comfortable already, comfortably top in terms of qualifying. He and Frank van Homert now starting to break away from the rest of the field. Rusty Griffiths holding back Troy Beck somewhat in the early stages, and there goes a launch move down the inside from Bradley Pocock, who locks it up and gets out of shape but manages to hold on ahead of Blaine Blackwell. That then releases Pocock up into 5th position. He Cost himself a little bit of time there finding his way past Blaine Blackwell, and a little bit of a margin now to make up to Rusty Griffiths and Troy Beck, who sit in 3rd and 4th places respectively. Pocock though clearly has a pace advantage. He's made up a few positions already on this opening lap. It's Mike Villard blasting clear then, Frank van Homert in 2nd place, and then trying to find his way through. Bradley Pocock cuts to the inside there on Troy Beck and comes through for 4th position, so that's another place gained by Bradley Pocock. He can't afford to be held up for too long while the top 2 are breaking clear. He cuts to the inside as they come across the timing beam for the first time to start the first full lap. Pocock cuts down to the inside, passes Rusty Griffiths, but he's run wide and leaves room on the inside for Troy Beck to come through and pass the pair of them. So Beck through from 5th to 3rd. Pocock will try to respond down the inside as they come into the infield section once again. But that was a great move from Troy Beck, opportunistic. Pocock's now going to get the better of him through for 3rd position. But the big winner of all of that situation was Troy Beck, who's managed to release himself from Rusty Griffiths, who's dropped down from 3rd to 5th positions and is now starting to come under some pressure from Blaine Blackwell as well. Watch out for Justin Sykes, who's directly behind Blackwell, and Dominic Foreman leading Dan Foreman and Andrew Luke, who round out the top 10. Bradley Pocock now breaking clear of Troy Beck, up in 3rd position, Beck in 4th position, and Blaine Blackwell has got his hands full here with Justin Sykes, who's all over his back wheel as they come over to the far side of the circuit once again. Frank van Homert with a decent advantage now over Bradley Pocock, and that's where the real big group is as Sykes again looks to the outside line on Blaine Blackwell. This is the fight for 6th position. Sykes will go up to the outside line on the bank top turn and does manage to pull alongside Blaine Blackwell, so should be through there for 6th place. Coming back down once again to complete another full lap. It was Mike Villard who led by 3 seconds as they crossed the timing beam for the first time. We'll see if Frank van Homert can reel in any of that deficit and where Bradley Pocock stacks down in comparison with Frank van Homert. They're on the same straight now, as you can see. Sykes is making progress through the field. Next up for him is Rusty Griffiths. It's a 1:35.8 for Mike Villard, a 1:37.6 for Frank van Homert, who drops another 2 seconds further back. Sykes has made up the position on Rusty Griffiths. He comes through for 5th. Blaine Blackwell still in 7th place, lapping at the same pace as Rusty Griffiths on that previous lap. So for the moment, things look fairly static in that midfield, although just as I say that, Blackwell tries to make the move down the inside on Rusty Griffiths. Can't make it stick for the moment at least. That's the battle for 6th, but pulling away out in front. Mike Villard looking simply sensational here. 5 seconds gained on the opening 2 laps. 3rd position then still with Bradley Pocock, about 1.5 seconds then to Troy Beck, who is coming under attack now from Justin Sykes, who's made his way through the field well. A very poor start from him, but here is Sykes going after Troy Beck, who sits in 4th position. He's got the pace, I would suggest, to live with some of the front runners, but only if he can clear the traffic. Sykes was held back on that previous lap, 0.3 of a second faster than Troy Beck, but remember the series of positions that Justin Sykes had to make up, so that's a good effort in terms of time. He loses it slightly as they come towards the final section at the top end of the circuit and back down towards, once again, the start-finish straight. It's Mike Villard who has this race under control by the looks of it, even as early as the 3rd lap of the race. Still gaining in that battle for 4th position is Justin Sykes, but Beck has been able to hold him off well, and while he does so, the top 3 are breaking clear. It was a top 2 group early on. Can Bradley Pocock continue to reel in Frank van Homert and challenge for 2nd place and potentially go after the early race leader, Mike Villard? Slightly slower on that previous lap. Villard at 1:36.2 on board with Frank van Homert, who sits in 2nd position, now 7 seconds back from the race leader, and I would suggest that it's already looking like a case of damage limitation for Villard's main rivals in this opening moto. Sykes has now found his way past Troy Beck and across the timing beam last time around, and Beck's gone off the circuit. Beck runs wide, trying to gain back lost ground in pursuit of Justin Sykes, and that should settle things down in terms of the top 4 positions in this first moto. We'll see if Pocock can continue to gain ground on Frank van Homert. Beck has now left himself vulnerable because he's got Blaine Blackwell directly behind him in 6th position, and Dominic Foreman not too far back either in 7th place. And in fact, Foreman was the fastest of these 3 riders on that previous lap, but the top 4 comfortably faster than anyone else lapping in this race. Frank van Homert losing ground now by the looks of it to Bradley Pocock, who was a second faster on lap number 4 and is continuing to reel in ground. So we'll see how long it is as Blackwell goes down. Blackwell gets gets right onto the tail of Troy Beck, but too close to the tail of Troy Beck, clips the back of him, goes down and loses the position to Dominic Foreman. So Foreman will go through and up into 6th place, and it was Blaine Blackwell who was on the march, who's found himself losing out on a position, although that looks like dramas for Dominic Foreman. Is that a mechanical problem for Foreman over at the far side of the circuit as Blackwell comes back through for 6th position? So plenty going on in this opening moto. Action-packed as you would expect from a World Championship event. It's Mike Villard who's had the only clear run in this race so far. 9 seconds clear of the rest of the group. That's David Lamb, looks set for retirement, helmet off. He was in 14th position last lap around, but that looks like race over for him. And that looks like potential drama for Frank van Homert, who has stopped out on the circuit. He's trying to get things back going again. And Bradley Pocock, meanwhile, has come through for 2nd position. Well, I did say things were turning out to be action-packed, and we wait to see when Frank van Homert will come through, if indeed he's been able to get that bike back started. Looks as though he's back up and running, but Bradley Pocock has moved through into 2nd position after disappointing mechanical drama for Frank van Homert. Wonders whether he may have just stalled it there on the infield, making his way through one of the hairpins, but he is back up and running again, albeit with a massive deficit now to make up to the top positions. Blaine Blackwell is the rider directly behind him, so by my reckoning, that will put Frank van Homert all the way down in 5th place until he crosses the timing beam next time around. We won't be able to confirm that, but we certainly can confirm that Mike Villard is well clear out in front in this opening pro moto of the 2017 Minibike World Championship. Van Homert sat 2nd, but he's released that place now to Bradley Pocock. The riders lapping quite superbly, with Mike Villard in particular, the pace setter, out in front. He's dropped off the pace in the closing stages. Villard wins in the opening moto. 2nd place will go the way of Bradley Pocock. Around the final turn he comes to take the checkered flag. Then we'll see Justin Sipes coming through. Sipes will hold on for 3rd position. Frank van Homert has managed to recover well. He's got the better of Troy Beck and will come through to take 4th position. There is Van Homert coming through around the final turns for the final time on the number 142 machine. So he claims 4th. It's Villard who wins it. It's Pocock in 2nd. It's Sipes in 3rd. Van Homert in 4th position. And Troy Beck will round out the top 5. But what an excellent... Oh, Beck with problems in the closing stages. And through comes both Blaine Blackwell and Dominic Foreman. So Beck ended up running the machine over the finish line in the end, and that's going to cost him a pair of places, and he loses out by less than a second on the 5th position that he held for the majority of the race. Villard wins it from Pocock in 2nd. They pick up the largest share of the championship points. Disappointment for Frank van Homert. Good recoveries through the field from both Pocock and Sipes, who provided the action there, having missed the start, coming through for a top 3 finish.
So race 1 is in the books. Mike Villard took the win, Bradley Pocock was in 2nd, and the American Justin Sipes was 3rd. We're about to line up for race 2 now. Let's hand it over to Alex in the booth. He's going to talk us through this race.
Race number 2 here in Doncaster for the 2017 Minibike World Championship, led after the opening moto by Mike Villard on 45 points, getting the better quite comfortably in the end of Bradley Pocock, who comes into this race 3 points back on 42, and Justin Sipes, who capitalised on a bit of misfortune for Frank van Homert to take 3rd place first time out. So Van Homert now has 8 points to make up in the championship totals. A win here would be helpful for him. Of course, he sat in 2nd position when misfortune struck in race number 1. Let's see what he can do against Mike Villard this time around. You sense that if the Frenchman makes the fastest start as he did in race number 1, he will have the pace advantage just as he did first time out. So comfortably clear in the first race, the fastest rider in qualifying as well, the points leader after race 1 of 5. Watch out for Mike Villard then at the start of this one, the 2nd moto of the 2017 Minibike World Championship. edginess on the start line, and we are underway. Vallard again makes the break from the centre. Blaine Blackwell with a faster start this time around. Pocock again tracked down on the inside line. He's not made a good start, but Justin Sykes, who was away so poorly first time out, has made a good one. He sits in second position. Blackwell dropping back through the field, has already dropped to fourth place. The lead is with Vallard then. Second place is with Sykes. This is a strong start for him compared to his disappointment first time out. Trying to work his way through now, it's Bradley Pocock. He's on the tail of Frank Van Homet. Third place is with Rusty Griffiths, who managed to get the better of Blaine Blackwell in a bit of a dogfight on the opening couple of turns. Blackwell then in fourth position. Fifth now is with Bradley Pocock, who's seen off the attentions of his British Championship rival Frank Van Homet, and another of the British Championship regulars, Blaine Blackwell, is directly ahead. Pocock looking to the inside, not quite close enough for the moment at least to strike, but that's where the focus is, because from third all the way down to seventh, they're in a real group at the moment, dropping back slightly from the early race leader Mike Vallard and Justin Sykes, who sits second. Then it's Griffiths in third. Blackwell is closing. Over at the far side of the circuit, he's going to look up to the outside line on the bank turn, can't quite pull alongside, gets held back, and that enables Bradley Pocock to get the inside run on one of the highest points of the circuit now as they come back towards the timing beam to complete the first lap. Griffiths has held on. Bradley Pocock now trying to find his way alongside Blaine Blackwell. Blackwell has the inside line. Pocock will dive for the outside. Blackwell has the shorter run and holds on. Pocock, though, will now have the momentum, and the left-hand side of the circuit down the inside into the bottom bend, and he manages to find his way past. And finally, Bradley Pocock has broken Blaine Blackwell and come through for fourth position. Not bad, having come through from sixth, remember, to overtake first Frank Van Homet and then Blaine Blackwell, and it doesn't look as though it'll be long before he passes Rusty Griffiths. Remember, Griffiths made a good start to the first motor and went backwards, and the same is happening in the second now as Pocock cuts right across the front of Griffiths and does so again to maintain the place. Frank Van Homet is next to try and pass Griffiths, and that's now over fourth position. So not a great start from Frank Van Homet in this one compared to a great start first time out. He'll hope for a little bit better fortune this time around, though, after his drama and dropping back through the field, losing 3 or 4 places initially in race number 1. Griffiths, the next rider in his crosshairs then, in fourth position for now. It's Vallard from Sykes. It's Pocock who's made his way through quickly to third. Van Homet is taking longer to pass Griffiths, and that's enabling Pocock to pull clear. Van Homet can ill afford to drop too many more points in this second race, with only 3 remaining after this one, of course. We've still got that 4-rider group as Van Homet gets held up. Griffiths lost control and locked up, and Van Homet had nowhere to go to try and avoid him, one of the narrower parts of this course. He is still ahead, though, of Blaine Blackwell, who had been passed by Frank Van Homet earlier in the lap, remember. And then it's Dominic Foreman directly behind them. Chris Ayres, Kevin Nielsen and David Lamb rounding out the top 10 as things stand. They come round to cross the timing beam at the end of the first full lap, the end of lap number 2, and it's going to be Mike Vallard who leads the way. A 1 minute 35.7, so just as he did first time out, he's breaking the rest of the field with relentless pace in the early stages. He could even afford to back it off later in the race in the first moto. Justin Sykes, 5 seconds back in second position, a 1 minute 37.9, as looking down to the inside, Frank Van Homet finally makes his move. He's got alongside and got clear, so that's for fourth position. Van Homet gets the better of Griffiths. He was a full second faster than Griffiths on that previous lap as he came through the field. Griffiths tries to repay the compliment, running the shorter route around the inside line, but it is Frank Van Homet who holds on. Blaine Blackwell still under pressure from sixth position. Dominic Foreman seems to be faster at the moment, a second faster in fact on that previous lap, and is now nibbling away at Blackwell's back wheel. Griffiths locking it up as he tries to get back on terms with Frank Van Homet in the race for fourth position. While Van Homet was stuck behind Griffiths, Pocock was almost 4 seconds faster than the pair of them directly behind. So it's the top 3 who've now made the breakaway, 4 seconds behind Bradley Pocock from third position, the rest of this group, and 5 riders running more or less nose to tail, but Frank Van Homet now starting to break away from them. How quickly will he be able to close down Bradley Pocock, who sits in third place? Remember that Pocock was coming at Frank Van Homet in race number 1 until Van Homet got into all sorts of difficulties and ended up dropping backwards and out of contention for a top 3 place in the opening race. So it's Sykes with Pocock directly behind him now in second and third positions. Vallard has pulled clear out in front. One suspects that you can almost forget about him as he comes over the line with a 1 minute 36.2, and then it's a big long wait to see who will come across the line in second position. It's still Sykes for the moment, but now 7.6 seconds back, and Pocock 1.3 seconds further than him. So 1.5 seconds made by Bradley Pocock on that lap number 3. He's coming after Justin Sykes. A second place won't do much in terms of restricting the deficit to Mike Villard, but it will at least ensure that the Frenchman doesn't start making huge gains with his rivals taking points off one another. Blackwell looking down to the inside now of Rusty Griffiths, whose tumble through the field continues. Blackwell claims 5th position then. Griffiths goes up to the outside line to see if he can build up his momentum. He's done so well, actually. Blackwell is going to be vulnerable here to a repeat move from Rusty Griffiths, but eventually covers the racing line, covers the line he wants, and Blackwell holds on. Bradley Pocock, as I said, is the rider making the biggest gains at the moment to 1 minute 37.3, a second slower than Mike Villard on that previous lap, but he was over a second faster than Justin Sykes, so the battle will shortly be joined for second position. Frank van Homert has comfortably shaken off Griffiths and Blackwell directly behind, and so the focus, as I said, now on this battle for P2 between Justin Sykes of the USA and Great Britain's finest, Bradley Pocock, 3rd position as they start to make their way through the back markers for the first time. Villard well clear out in front. As I said, you can forget about anyone passing him now on pure pace. 7.5 seconds clear, and halfway through the race it doesn't look as though he is going to be caught here. Bradley Pocock renewing a rivalry here with Justin Sykes, having got the better of the American directly by 1 place first time out. 3 points ahead of Sykes coming into this race. They're almost nose to tail now as they cross the timing beam once again. 7/10 of a second between them. 9 seconds back this fight from Mike Villard out in front. Pocock looking down to the inside line, but he's not quite close enough to strikers yet. Van Homert behind them is now lapping at the same pace as Bradley Pocock, but over 5 seconds back from Pocock. It doesn't look likely that he'll be able to make up enough ground to challenge for a top 3 finish as Pocock comes diving down the inside, completely unsettles Justin Sykes. Real aggression there being shown by the British rider to come through for second place. Well, that came from absolutely nowhere. No prisoners taken whatsoever by Bradley Pocock, who thrusts his way past Justin Sykes, and that might just enable Frank van Homert to get back into contention now for a top 3 finish. It looked like he was too far adrift, but Sykes was held up quite dramatically by that collision with Bradley Pocock, and Frank van Homert will be trying to take advantage in the closing stages of this race and see if he can find his way through into 3rd. Remember, he was restricted to 4th place first time out, directly behind Justin Sykes, and a bit of a pecking order is starting to develop in this 2017 Minibike World Championship. Van Homert to the inside of Sykes. This is the race for 2nd and 3rd, remember. Van Homert's come well off the previous turn and through the rhythm section, through for 3rd place as well. So Van Homert recovering through the field back up into P3, but it looks as though those top 3 positions are now largely settled. Villard well clear from Pocock in 2nd, Van Homert 3 seconds further back in P3, and then Justin Sykes in 4th position. The closer fight now is starting to develop over 5th position. Blaine Blackwell ahead of Rusty Griffiths and Dominic Foreman, as Blackwell has seemingly struggled to lap the back markers, and that has enabled Griffiths and Foreman to both close in. Just 1.8 seconds between those 3 riders now, and Blackwell hemorrhaging time compared to Rusty Griffiths, who is gaining, and Dominic Foreman likewise with a new personal best as he crosses the timing beam there. So it's Blackwell ahead of Griffiths. Griffiths cutting to the inside, might be able to find his way through here. Blackwell didn't get a good run on the home straight, and Griffiths has indeed come through, and that's enough for Griffiths to take up the challenge now in 5th position. Blaine Blackwell dropping back to 6th, and then it's Dominic Foreman in 7th. Blackwell cutting to the inside once again. Griffiths has the outside line and the faster run to hold on to that place. So it's Villard from Pocock, from Van Homert from Sykes. Then it's Griffiths, who at the moment is leading this 3-rider fight, which looks set to be the one that will go right down towards the closing stages. Although Frank van Homert now isn't too far behind, reigniting a perennial struggle against his British Championship rival, Bradley Pocock. Villard might be well and truly clear, but Bradley Pocock isn't out of the woods just yet. Pocock versus Van Homert over 2nd position in this 2nd moto. Time ticking away for Van Homert to try and find a way through, but he's certainly got the pace advantage. Van Homert now right on the tail of Bradley Pocock, who got a little bit squirrely as they now go over the highest point on the circuit, with Frank van Homert pursuing Bradley Pocock closely. Mike Villard is away and gone. This is all about the fight for second position. Villard would probably be grateful here for Van Homert overhauling Bradley Pocock, because after 2 race wins as things stand, Pocock will only be 6 points back. If Van Homert finds a way through, that will gain Villard an extra 3-point advantage. They come now into the final lap with Villard out in front, Pocock in second, Van Homert in third. Justin Sykes has dropped well back from this fight as Van Homert has disappeared away from the American, who couldn't really stay with the pace of the Dutchman directly ahead of him. Griffiths and Blackwell, their race is continuing on. That's not quite settled just yet, that struggle for 5th position, but Dominic Foreman doesn't seem to have the pace to live with them even while they're fighting one another. The focus might be on the race for second, but there are battles going on right the way through the field, right the way down and outside of the top 10 positions as well. There are still close fights on track, but the focus at the moment is on Bradley Pocock as he attempts to hold off Frank Van Homert. 2 rivals, as I've said, or main rivals in the British Championship, and they're renewing their rivalry here, but at the moment it's only for second position, and it could also potentially be for second in the points totals, but only if things really go the way of Frank Van Homert here, because Van Homert, remember, has points to make up after the first moto. He came into this race 5 points back from Bradley Pocock, and at the moment it doesn't look as though he's able to find a way past. He was able to close quickly, but overtaking Bradley Pocock far from easy. We've seen some real aggression shown by Pocock against a couple of his rivals in this 2017 Minibike World Championship already, and once he had Frank Van Homert on his tail, Pocock has really tried to pick up the pace. A new personal best on the 8th lap of this race. Villard looking over his shoulder. He's coming in towards the checkered flag and to take it. It's going to be another race win and another victory at a canter here for Mike Villard. Villard makes it 2 wins out of 2. But will it be Pocock or will it be Van Homert? It's Pocock who holds on for second position. Frank Van Homert gets third. Justin Sykes is next round to claim 4th position ahead of Rusty Griffiths, who has managed to drop Blaine Blackwell on the closing lap. Blackwell coming under some pressure late on from Dominic Foreman, and that one hasn't quite played out as yet. So we'll see. We can see the 3 riders just on the edge of the shot, just making their way around towards the final turn, but it looks as though they will hold on to their respective positions, and it will therefore be Rusty Griffiths who holds on for 5th position ahead of Blaine Blackwell in 6th and Dominic Foreman in 7th. More great racing in the second moto, but more dominance from Mike Villard. 2 wins out of 2. He now leads the standings on 90 points, with Bradley Pocock and 2 second places on 84. Justin Sykes and Frank Van Homert each with a 3rd and 4th position on 76 points apiece.
Okay, so that's race 2 in the books. Mike Villard gets the win once again, followed home by Bradley Pocock and Frank Van Homert. The stage is set for race 3. Let's head to the line, shall we?
So a reminder of the current situation in this 2017 Minibike World Championship. As we head towards the halfway stage, it's Mike Villard out in front with a 6-point margin. He and Bradley Pocock have finished 1st and 2nd respectively in the 2 races so far. Directly behind them in the standings, Frank Van Homert and Justin Sykes, who've taken points from one another, are on 76 apiece. The only other riders realistically looking in contention for the title at this stage, Blaine Blackwell and Dominic Foreman on 70 points each. Rounding out the top 10, Chris Ayres, Raphael Bezassier, Ashley Gorman and Mathieu Lafont as we line up for the 3rd race of this 2017 Minibike World Championship. Can anyone beat Mike Villard out of the start? That could be critical, because it's been 2 whole shots out of 2 for Villard and 2 comfortable race wins. Race number 3 then gets underway. Another fast start from Mike Villard. Justin Sykes is away well. On the inside line in 3rd position, Rusty Griffiths. The outside line is with Blaine Blackwell. Frank Van Homert trying to pull level with him early on for 4th place. The top 2 starting to break away already. Griffiths has got the acceleration to pass Blackwell, and Frank Van Homert has done the same. And now Chris Ayres coming down the inside to pass Blaine Blackwell, who's going backwards in the early stages of this race, already down to 6th position. And now with Bradley Pocock directly behind him, Pocock having seen off the attentions of Dominic Foreman early on. Pocock now moves to pass the number 71. He's on the tail of Chris Ayres directly ahead of him. The top two, Mike Vallard and Justin Sykes, but they haven't got too much of a margin over Frank Van Homet. The top three have stayed broadly together early on. Rusty Griffiths having dropped behind Frank Van Homet. He sits in 4th position. The trainers formed up behind him in each of the opening 2 motos so far, with Griffiths going backwards, and it would be a surprise if this race didn't pan out in the same way. Chris Ayres under assault now. Around the outside of him comes the number 57 of Bradley Pocock to come through and take another place. So it won't be long before Pocock is on the tail of Rusty Griffiths for what is now 4th position. Griffiths, remember, having dropped behind Frank Van Homet in the early part of this race, having sat in 3rd position on the opening turn. Mike Vallard making the break once again. This is the first time that Justin Sykes has been directly behind him and trying to close him down. A couple of different riders have had a go, but nobody has been able to do it with much success as Bradley Pocock gains ground now on Rusty Griffiths. He's going to look down the inside into the bottom bend, and through he comes for 4th position. So, first time across the timing beam, it's Vallard with a 1.9 second advantage. Frank Van Homet over 2 seconds further back in 3rd position. Bradley Pocock directly behind him, and that's where the group of traffic really starts. It's a real train from 3rd position down. Bradley Pocock versus Frank Van Homet. That rivalry has been reignited twice already in this Minibike World Championship, but never for the race lead. And again, it's Mike Vallard who's pulling away out in front. Justin Sykes is doing his level best to stay with him, but at the moment there is no holding back Mike Vallard. He's irrepressible once again out front. 3rd place with Frank Van Homet, but that looks likely to come under some pressure now because Bradley Pocock has gained in the majority of that 1 second deficit to the trained eye. He cuts to the inside there in a first real attempt to make an overtaking manoeuvre. Van Homet is going to have eyes in the back of his head here. He's gone up to the outside line. Pocock tries the shorter route but can't quite get there. Van Homet with the easier run holds on at the far side of the circuit for 3rd position this race between Frank Van Homet and Bradley Pocock. Pocock cuts the inside. Shorter route once again for him. Side by side, but Van Homet has the momentum, and on one of the highest and fastest points of the circuit, Frank Van Homet will hold on for 3rd position. It's Vallard, Sykes, Van Homet versus Pocock. Then that big group further back, and we'll see where Rusty Griffiths drops to on this lap while we've been focusing on 3rd and 4th positions. Will he be able to hold off the attentions of Chris Ayres, Dominic Foreman and Blaine Blackwell? 1:37.3 for Mike Vallard, 1:37.8 from Justin Sykes. So not a bad effort in trying to keep pace with the race leader. 2.5 seconds between the top two out in front then. Frank Van Homet with just 0.4 of a second now over Bradley Pocock, and Rusty Griffiths is riding a pretty solid race here in 5th position. He held on well to places last time out and managed to get the better of Blaine Blackwell and the rest of that middle order group. Well, this time around he's doing the same. He's a second clear of Chris Ayres, and the closest fight is for 3rd position, where Pocock was faster by 0.5 second than Frank Van Homet last lap around and is less than 0.5 second behind him here. You can see what I was talking about previously in that group further back with Rusty Griffiths holding on ahead of Chris Ayres and Dominic Foreman, but he hasn't got a supreme pace advantage over the rest of the field. He's just doing a great job of getting up ahead of them from the start, and then he has lost out to the 3 fastest riders in this race, having all overhauled him. Vallard and Sykes, remember, were away and gone from the gate drop. And then it's the race for 3rd position, but at the moment Bradley Pocock doesn't seem to have the answer to Frank Van Homet. He's dropped back a little bit on this 3rd lap. There is Griffiths ahead of Ayres and ahead of Foreman. Blaine Blackwell, well, he's mysteriously dropped off the pace in this one. He's down in 8th position and hasn't been as convincing as usual. Blaine Blackwell this weekend, he's been one of the top performers in the Minibike British Championship in 2017 with some brilliant successions of hole shots, but he hasn't been particularly sharp from the start, and he hasn't really had the pace in race trim either. It's Sykes then in 2nd place, crossing the line this time around significantly slower than Mike Vallard, and 4.7 seconds back at the end of the 3rd lap. Frank Van Homet is next through in 3rd. He's shaken off Bradley Pocock, who is the slowest of the lead quartet on that lap. a new personal best from Frank van Homer to 1 minute 37.8. Just 0.3 of a second off the pace of Mike Vallard out in front. So we might yet see Frank van Homer closing down the top two, but it doesn't look as though anyone's going to close down Mike Vallard. Those aerial shots give you a good appreciation of the distance between the race leader and the rest of the group behind him. We'll see if Bradley Pocock can find his feet and pick up his pace this time around, because he dropped 3 seconds back from Frank van Homer on that previous lap and now sits 10 seconds back from the early race leader Mike Vallard, and his main rival in the championship here, Bradley Pocock, being down in 4th position, could be a real gift for Mike Vallard, who is already looking set for a 3rd successive victory. 5 seconds or so clear now of Justin Sipes, who sits in 2nd position. Battle further down the order going on as well, but it's Van Homert who has really started to close down Justin Sipes now for 2nd position. Less than a second in it between 2nd and 3rd places. Vallard, then it's Sipes versus Van Homert, who seems to be bringing Bradley Pocock with him. The separate race I was just talking about between Rusty Griffiths, Chris Ayres and Dominic Foreman, but Griffiths has seemingly dropped that battle now as we head through to complete another lap, and it's Vallard out in front, Sipes for 2nd, Van Homert tucked in behind him in 3rd. There was a moment there at the far side of the circuit that I thought Van Homert might be able to find a way through down the inside, getting a little bit squirrely there back around Justin Sipes, and Van Homert seems the more consistent at this stage of the race. He's almost alongside, he gets his front wheel up, outside line now for Frank Van Homert. He's going to try and build up his momentum and build up an overtaking opportunity. Cuts to the inside. Will this be the opportunity he's been looking for? It's a block pass. Sipes has the momentum, but Van Homert has the racing line and comes through for 2nd. His best ride so far here. Frank Van Homert through into P2 and up ahead of Justin Sipes. Will Bradley Pocock be next to find a way through? Well, an improved lap last time around from Bradley Pocock, but he was coming, remember, from a distance back. As they work their way through lap traffic, that could give Bradley Pocock the impetus that he needs, but 11 seconds back now from the race leader, Mike Vallard, who has started to relax off his own pace. Of course, he is the first rider meeting all of this lap traffic and probably catching them by surprise. They won't believe how quickly Mike Vallard is gaining on them. Coming through now, Frank Van Homert. He gets a little bit into some difficulty there, getting the better of James Cook on the 291 machine. He was held up briefly. There's a group of 3 riders now all lapping traffic together. Frank Van Homert taking a tear off as he holds on ahead of Justin Sipes, having made that pass, and Bradley Pocock is now right with the pair of them, nose to tail as they come in towards the completion of another lap. Justin Sipes looking to the inside of Frank Van Homert, and on the inside of him, Bradley Pocock comes carving through and up into 3rd position. So Sipes has lost out on 2 positions in very short order here, as first Frank Van Homert and then Bradley Pocock come past. As things stand then, this would move Frank Van Homert up above Justin Sipes, but it would also be a handy result for Mike Vallard to take another chunk of points over Bradley Pocock, as Van Homert looks to the outside line on one of the lap runners. That's the number 36, Joe Banks, and that gives Bradley Pocock the opportunity to make a move on the inside line. Van Homert tries to respond, but Pocock, using one of the lapped runners as an opportunity, cuts through on the inside of Frank Van Homert and makes it 2 passes in 2 laps to come through from 4th to 2nd. Good ride there from Bradley Pocock, somewhat opportunistically. Joe Banks went to the mid-track and Frank Van Homert tried to come around the outside of him, and that enabled the rest of the group to kind of find a way through. But it's going to be tough from here to try and make up ground on Mike Vallard, who's 8 seconds clear. Not quite such a large leading margin in this one for Mike Vallard as we've seen perhaps in the previous motos, but it's still significant enough. He was relaxed last lap around and the slowest of the top trio, while Pocock and Frank Van Homert duked it out, and it's Vallard with just over a lap to go who's surely going to head towards victory here. Vallard, Van Homert and Pocock dicing over 2nd place, but it's Pocock who's got the upper hand now. Sipes, having been relegated to 4th position, doesn't seem to have an answer or a fight back. Then an isolated 5th position for Rusty Griffiths, who's having to work hard to hold on ahead of Dominic Foreman. Foreman, having passed Ayres, has dropped him off as this race has gone on. So we're into the final lap, as I said. Mike Vallard, the length of a straight ahead of the rest of the group. Fight for 2nd and 3rd position has now settled down. Bradley Pocock has managed to drop off Frank van Homet directly behind him, and Justin Sipes well adrift. The closest race in the closing stages is going to be for 5th position between Rusty Griffiths and Dominic Foreman. Oh, Foreman's gone down. Curse of the commentator, just as it looked as though Foreman was closing down Rusty Griffiths. Foreman has instead fallen down, and that's going to drop him a couple of places back as well. We saw the orange livery of Chris Ayres flashing past and into 6th position. Rusty Griffiths is going to be comfortable in P5 now, with Ayres some 7 seconds or so behind him in 6th place, and Dominic Foreman now out of contention for a top 5 finish. So that surely settles it down. The closest race up front between Van Homet and Sipes. Sipes just cutting around the outside of one of the lapped runners and through. I think that's Dan Foreman down in 14th position and through past him, but he's not close enough to strike on Frank van Homet. Mike Vallard, meanwhile, out in front, is over 8 seconds up on Bradley Pocock. So it looks as though the top 2 will finish exactly as they did last time out, and surely Frank van Homet will take 3rd, as he has done previously here this afternoon as well, and that will move him above Justin Sipes in the point standing. Sipes then will drop away from Frank van Homet in 4th, and with the rest of the field all dropping to all sorts of misfortune, Dominic Foreman with the 4. Blaine Blackwell hasn't had a good race, but he looks set to take 7th position now away from Dominic Foreman. Well, that's going to mean that there's a bit of a cliff outside of the top 4 in the point standings. But you can't look past Mike Vallard as the potential champion here this weekend. Vallard makes it 3 wins out of 3. Bradley Pocock, his nearest rival, just hasn't had the pace to live with him, particularly from the starts, and that has ended up costing him. But he did work his way through well into 2nd position there. 3rd place going the way of Frank van Homet then, ahead of Justin Sipes, and it sets up our 2 remaining motos with a miracle now needed by any of his rivals to get the better of Mike Vallard. Race number 4 of the 2017 Minibike World Championship. Mike Vallard leads it by 9 points and now needs to maintain his consistency until the checkered flag falls on the final race to be declared the inaugural world champion. He leads ahead of Bradley Pocock, with Frank van Homet 11 points now further adrift and 2 up on Justin Sipes. Blaine Blackwell and Chris Ayres rounding out the top 6. The only other riders still in realistic contention, and they would need a series of results to go their way now from other riders as well. The only riders who've still got this competition in his own hands is Mike Vallard himself. Even 2 second places now will be good enough for him to take the title after 3 victories in the first 3 races. Mike Vallard then versus Bradley Pocock in direct competition in the top 2 positions. Edginess before the gate drops on race number 4. Pocock with his fastest start of the World Championship so far. He seems to bog down in the run down to the first turn, ends up 3rd. Fastest start from Mike Vallard, Blaine Blackwell into 2nd. Pocock then in 3rd place. Rusty Griffiths down in 5th. Not quite such a strong start as we've seen from him in previous outings, as Frank van Homet loses his footing there, and around the outside of him comes Justin Sipes, moving through into 4th position. Frank van Homet then in P5. Sipes seems to have an early turn of pace here as he closes down Bradley Pocock and sets about challenging for 3rd position, but Pocock has now made a pass on Blaine Blackwell, so that's for 2nd position. Blackwell relegated down to 3rd. It's Sipes in 4th position. Frank van Homet in 5th. 7th place at the moment is with Chris Ayres, as Sipes now makes a move on Blaine Blackwell. I did say that Justin Sipes seemed to have plenty of pace in the early part of this race number 4, and he's demonstrated it with a couple of overtaking manoeuvres. Van Homet may well be next to pass Blaine Blackwell. He comes around the outside, and Blackwell seems to be struggling for pace once again here in race number 4. Rusty Griffiths under attack from Chris Ayres. It's not been consistent in terms of point scoring for Griffiths, but it has been a good World Championship so far for Chris Ayres, who sits 6th in the point standings and 8 clear of his nearest rival in the overalls. Ayres not quite able to get the better of Griffiths for now, at least, though, as we focus on the number 71, Blaine Blackwell, who has dropped a couple of places since the early part of the race, but still sits up ahead of Rusty Griffiths. They're coming round to complete the first lap and cross the timing beam for the first time. Still close between Griffiths and Chris Ayres directly behind him. For the moment, though, the race seems to be settling down, with Vallard out in front once again. Pocock his closest challenger, but he got off to a better start this time around, Bradley Pocock, so we'll see if he has the pace to live with Mike Villard over a full race distance. Villard in front with Bradley Pocock in hot pursuit now in P2, and Justin Sykes and Frank Van Homert are staying with them. A bit of a gap, as you can see there, developing to 5th place. Blaine Blackwell looking a little bit isolated and up ahead of Rusty Griffiths and Chris Ayres, and Ayres still trying to look for a way through on the tail of Rusty Griffiths. Here we are with the number 1 of the British Championship. Frank Van Homert, of course, has had to trade that number in for a first World Championship, and he's on the number 142 for the duration of this weekend. He's dropping slightly back from Justin Sykes, who sits in P3, but the top 4 are all covered by one straight, albeit the largest straight on the circuit over at the far side of the circuit. Mike Villard looking good out in front. He's already coming across lapped runners and making his way through with great alacrity. Could it be win number 4? He would put one hand on this World Championship trophy if he can do it. Mike Villard of France ahead of Bradley Pocock of Great Britain. He's second in the point standings at the moment. He's under a great deal of pressure from Justin Sykes. Sykes has never really been dropped by Bradley Pocock, and this has been probably his best performance of the weekend so far. Justin Sykes, Frank Van Homert, his closest rival in terms of the point standings. Van Homert at the moment sitting 3rd and in line for a place on the championship podium, but he would drop back into the clutches of Justin Sykes if things stay as they are in this one. Race number 4, Villard, Pocock, Van Homert and Sykes, but at the moment it's Sykes up ahead of the rider who sits 3rd in the provisional standings. Van Homert cuts the inside, he's made the pass, and unfortunately for Sykes, he caught up with one of the lap runners at just the wrong moment. The back marker was on the outside line. That's the line that Justin Sykes had committed to, and a wily move there from Frank Van Homert to come through for 3rd place. Bradley Pocock next in his sights sits up in 2nd place, but if Van Homert manages to get the better of Pocock, that will really do some severe damage to the Brits' challenge in terms of the race against Mike Villard for the title. As down goes Frank Van Homert, and he very nearly gets run over by Justin Sykes because he's fallen right into the American's path. So the focus on Frank Van Homert as he was trying to close down Bradley Pocock for 2nd, and he suffered a fall, and that just goes to show the extreme challenge that one of the best riders in British Minibike Championship history, Frank Van Homert, has gone down there chasing down the race leaders. The point being that even some of the best riders in the world can make errors under pressure. We've seen it there from Frank Van Homert, who drops out of contention for a top 3 place, seemingly at this stage at least, in the 4th moto. It really would be an incredible recovery for him to make it up and challenge for the top positions. Talking about challenging for the top positions, Bradley Pocock already had a little look to the inside coming off the final turn of that previous lap, and now he's managed to force his way through on the inside of Mike Villard as they come up on lap runners. I think that's Kevin Nielsen of Denmark that they are making their way through, and Villard has got held up to quite a dramatic extent behind these lap runners, and Bradley Pocock has not only been able to pass him with a bit of a send out of the back wheel just to make sure of the overtaking manoeuvre, but he's also managed to gap him quite quickly. And will Mike Villard now just settle for 2nd position, knowing that the vast majority of his championship lead would remain intact? Even with the result as things stand, he would sit 6 points clear with 1 race remaining as Rusty Griffiths pulls off to the side of the circuit, goggles off. It looks like a retirement for the number 30 bike in this one. But I was talking about Bradley Pocock and Mike Villard, and things are starting to look settled up front because Pocock has managed to make the overtake and then disappear off into the distance. But I was saying that Villard, with a 6-point championship lead, he would only need 2nd from the final race, even if Bradley Pocock does go on to win in the 5th moto. Focus then perhaps on the duels further down the order, but the race is starting to spread out, certainly among the top 4 positions, with Pocock leading for the first time in this World Championship. He hasn't got a big margin over Mike Villard, but whether the Frenchman will risk it to try and recapture the lead remains to be seen, knowing that it's just a numbers game and a percentages game now in the closing stages of the Minibike World Championship, with back-to-back wins in the first 3 motos for Mike Villard. He's well on his way towards the title, but Bradley Pocock might have just given the neutral a bit of hope that there will still be a race and still be a fight in this championship up for grabs in the final moto. We're into the final lap now, and you can see that Vallard is hardly pushing as hard as he did in the early stages of the first 3 motos as we head into the final lap now of the the penultimate moto of this Minibike World Championship for 2017. Van Homert has never been able to make up enough ground on Justin Sipes, so it looks set to finish Pocock, Vallard, Sipes and Van Homert in those top 4 positions. Blaine Blackwell ahead of Chris Ayres further back down the order. The retirement, of course, of Rusty Griffiths has affected that middle order battle once again, but Griffiths was already trying to make up ground in the context of the championship after drop points earlier on in the competition. Sipes making his way through as we return to Blaine Blackwell down in 5th position. Likewise, looking in a pretty isolated place now in the latter stages of this 4th moto. Things have settled down, and provisionally, in terms of the championship, that would mean a 25-point deficit from Mike Vallard to Frank Van Homert and Justin Sipes, who will be tied after this one on 152 championship points. If things stay as they are, it would also mean Blaine Blackwell being mathematically in contention, but realistically out of the fight, 37 points back from Mike Vallard, with 45, of course, the maximum score in each round. And talking about maximum scores, here is Bradley Pocock making his way through the final sequence of turns to become only the 2nd different race winner in this World Championship. Pocock takes the checkered flag. The British rider with the maximum 45 points will move to within 6 of the championship leader, Mike Vallard, who fails to add to his 3 race wins. Not much in it in the end between the top 2, but a brilliant pass from Bradley Pocock earlier on in the race to force Vallard out of the way. And Vallard then got caught up in traffic, and that gave the impetus to Bradley Pocock. 3rd over the line will go to Justin Sipes, probably his best ride of the weekend so far. And he now moves level on points with Frank Van Homert, who finishes directly behind him there in 4th position. So quite a significant margin now separating the top 4, but the top 2 in particular have broken away. Mike Vallard leads the championship by 6 points with just 1 race remaining in this 2017 Minibike World Championship.
We've had 4 races, we've got 1 to go. We're about to crown a world champion. Let's hand it over to Alex. He's going to talk us through the 5th and final race.
The 2017 Minibike World Championship has seemingly come down to a straightforward shootout between Mike Vallard and Bradley Pocock. Unless both of those 2 riders retire, it seems highly unlikely that any of their nearest rivals could capitalise and take the title. Frank Van Homert and Justin Sipes, 19 points back from Bradley Pocock, who sits in 2nd. Mike Vallard leads it, 3 race victories to 1 in favour of the French rider, and therefore 6 points in the overalls. All that Bradley Pocock can do is win the 5th and final race, as he took victory in race number 4, and hope that Vallard will end up stranded further down the order. So Bradley Pocock needs some of his rivals from this competition, Frank Van Homert, Justin Sipes, just as an example of the 2 closest contenders to get in Mike Vallard's way here. Will anyone be able to get in Mike Vallard's way as he chases the title? Dominant in the first 3 races, beaten for the first time last time out. It's the 5th and final moto as the Frenchman looks to seal the inaugural title. Away they go. Fastest start is with Vallard once again. Blaine Blackwell tracking him in 2nd, and Bradley Pocock has got stuck in the middle of a pack going down into the first turn. It's been the story of his World Championship challenge. He hasn't been able to get away from the gates fast enough, and that has really hamstrung him throughout this weekend. He is going to try and battle back from further down the order. We saw him pass Mike Vallard last time out in the 4th moto. Will he be able to do the same again in the 5th? He's going to need a series of results to go his way now for him to get back into contention here. There is Bradley Pocock, stranded right the way down the field. As I said, it all went wrong for him in the early stages, and he does need things to go his way now. Vallard it is who leads it. Fight for 2nd, we got a faller. That's Blaine Blackwell dropping out of 2nd position. Frank Van Homert was looking to the outside line to try and pass him, and Blackwell has gone down, so we're going to have 2 riders now trying to make their way back through the field as we see Justin Sipes challenging on the inside of Dominic Foreman. David Lambert made a brilliant start, but he now starts to drop back. after a rocket ship getaway in the early stages here. Wait for Bradley Pocock to come into the picture. That is how far adrift he is from the rest of the group. You can see all of the riders who've been lap traffic, the vast majority of them in the previous motos, only now being overhauled by Bradley Pocock. Here he comes, closing in on the rest of the group and attempting to gain ground. This is Raphael Bezassier, one of the best performers from the opening couple of races in the lower order of the top 10. Holding on ahead at the moment of Bradley Pocock. Mike Villard has come over the line, 4 seconds up on Frank van Homert in second. Justin Sykes in third. Dominic Foreman in fourth, having passed David Lamb. Chris Ayres in sixth. Then it's Troy Beck, Mathieu Lafont, Jody Burton and Blaine Blackwell rounding out the top 10. Blackwell after that fall. Meanwhile, coming through now, having passed Bezassier and now also getting the better of Ashley Gorman. Bradley Pocock moves into the top 10 and it's a fall for Jody Burton. So that will release Bradley Pocock now up into 9th position and directly on the tail of Blaine Blackwell, and he finds his way down the inside of Blackwell. Pocock is making impressive progress through the field, but he's got to contend with Mike Villard, who is the pace setter once again in this one, who has broken well clear. Blaine Blackwell also moving through the field, but it's Bradley Pocock doing it somewhat faster. Admittedly, after Pocock's dramas in the early stages, it's an achievement for him just to be back inside the top 10. We'll see how far he can push forward in this field. Remember, it's a World Championship lineup, so it's not going to be easy for Bradley Pocock to make up positions, but it's been so far so good for him. Chris Ayres there in 6th position, directly behind him a couple of riders, and then we see Bradley Pocock and Blaine Blackwell making their way through as Raphael Bezassier overhauls Ashley Gorman. I suspect that's going to be for 10th place now. We'll get confirmation of that when they cross the timing beam at the end of the first full lap, which is the end of lap number 2. Meanwhile, Bradley Pocock has made another place. That is going to be David Lamb dropping backwards, but it's Mike Villard who crosses the line with a 5-second lead over Frank van Homert with a new fastest lap of the race, a 1:38.2 compared to a 1:39.9 for Van Homert behind him, and 0.4 of a second slower than that, Justin Sykes on that previous lap. Bradley Pocock now has Troy Beck in his sights. Pocock looking to the inside line. Meanwhile, Beck is attempting to make a pass on Chris Ayres for 5th place. So this is the battle for 5th, 6th and 7th. Ayres goes defensive on the inside. Beck up to the outside, has the momentum. He will carry that now around the outside of Chris Ayres, side by side for 5th position. Is holding the inside ground well, but while he holds back Troy Beck, that enables Bradley Pocock to gain on the pair of them. Beck on the outside now of Ayres. Will Pocock be able to use that to his advantage on the inside? The answer for now is no, and Beck holds station in 6th position with Bradley Pocock directly behind him in 7th, and Pocock now cuts through into 6th. And Beck, you almost sense, knew that move was coming, and it didn't look as though he put up too much of a fight against Bradley Pocock coming through for 6th. Will Chris Ayres put up a greater fight over P5 as Pocock goes to the outside to see if he can build up some momentum here? Ayres struggling there, pushing himself on forward with his left foot as Pocock gains over at the far side of the circuit. Surely it's only a matter of time now before Bradley Pocock finds his way through into the top 5. He's done it with a block pass at the far end of the circuit. So Bradley Pocock now up into 5th. That means that 3 riders separate himself from Mike Villard out in front. Frank van Homert, who sits in 2nd, Justin Sykes in 3rd, and Dominic Foreman in 4th. On paper, you'd expect Foreman to fall the easiest. He was running 3 seconds a lap slower over the first couple of laps. He hasn't crossed the timing beam yet at the end of lap number 3. Now he does. 9 seconds back from the leader. The gap is just a second between himself now and Bradley Pocock. A 1:42.3 for Pocock, as Chris Ayres tries to find a way past now on Troy Beck, and Bradley Pocock has picked off Dominic Foreman, so that didn't take very long at all. Foreman going back up to the outside line, but Bradley Pocock, having come at a huge rate of knots to pass Dominic Foreman, should now be unchallenged by Foreman on paper for the remainder of this race. So Pocock moving through into the top 4. It's going to be harder now to make up the 6-second gap to Justin Sykes, who sits in 3rd position, and then even harder than that to close down Mike Villard, who has a 7-second lead out in front against Frank van Homert. It's looking now as though, barring major dramas, barring major errors in the closing stages of this 5th moto, Mike Villard will seal the championship. Bradley Pocock further down the order in 4th position, but even if Vallard retires, Frank Van Homert and Justin Sipes surely won't be able to make up enough ground to stop Bradley Pocock from sealing the crown. So as I said before we got underway with this race, it's a straight shootout between Vallard and Pocock, and since it's Vallard who leads, surely it's the Frenchman who will take a 4th race victory and seal the crown. He knows he can afford to ease up. He's got 7 seconds in his pocket. Mike Vallard then, with 1 lap remaining, is well on course to seal the World Championship here in Doncaster. Frank Van Homert crosses the line. He has made up a little bit of ground, but it's still 6.5 seconds between the top 2. This should be enough for Frank Van Homert, though, to take a place on the championship podium, bearing in mind that he came into this race tied on points with Justin Sipes, and Sipes is now directly behind him, and Sipes was significantly slower, in fact, than Van Homert on that previous lap. So I wonder whether Sipes got himself in some mischief on that previous lap, because, as I said, that is quite a dramatic margin to drop back from Frank Van Homert in seconds. Well, the top 3 positions then looking broadly decided. Bradley Pocock is now 3 seconds back from Justin Sipes, so he is gaining, but it doesn't look as though he's gaining quickly enough to really mount an assault. He may be able to get to Justin Sipes, considering how significantly slower Sipes was on that previous lap than either Frank Van Homert or Bradley Pocock in the positions directly around him. We join Frank Van Homert, who sits in 2nd place, but it's Mike Vallard out in front, who is heading on towards victory and heading on towards the title. Frank Van Homert also coming through lapped runners. Justin Sipes is back up on the pace now. You can see him making his way around the outside and on towards the tail of Kevin Nielsen. He's got Bradley Pocock for company. Things could get pretty lively over 3rd position in the closing stages. As Sipes passes Nielsen, Pocock now does the same up on the outside line, but it's not going to have any impact on the championship itself, because Mike Vallard is making his way through the final sequence of turns with a massive leading margin in his pocket, and it's going to be Mike Vallard who will take a 5th win in 5 to become the 2017 Minibike World Champion. Sensational riding from Mike Vallard, the whole shot king in the World Championship, and that's been the basis of his success. First on the scene to congratulate him, his fellow countryman Mathieu Lafont, a lap down in 11th position, and then Frank Van Homert and Bradley Pocock, the top 2 in the Minibike British Championship, but they couldn't keep up with Mike Vallard, who becomes the inaugural Minibike World Champion.